Well, welcome back. If you're joining us, you are watching Channel 1 News. Of course, now it's time for us to shift focus to EcoWatch, and tonight we are focusing on how exactly do we save our water towers, of course coming at a time when the government has since put into place a ban on logging for 3 months, and we just want to focus on what are some of the sustainable ways that we can be able to address this and protect our water towers at the same time. Of course, if you have been using charcoal, then you must be aware that currently a tin of charcoal is retailing for 100 shillings, where previously it was retailing for 50 shillings. So it brings about also a question of how sustainable is this, and what are some of the economical ways that we can be able to address this, and what are some of the alternatives that perhaps the government can be able to advise the public. And for more discussions around this, saving our water towers and sustainability of this, we have with us the CEO of the Kenya Water Towers Agency, that is Julius Tanui, who will be telling us what the agency is doing in terms of coordination to protect and preserve our water towers, as well as ensure conservation. Thank you so much for coming to our studios.
Thank you.
And I want to begin with, what the Kenya Water Agency does in terms of protecting our forests. To what extent have you been able to protect the country's water towers?
We've done much, I think, of course, save for the challenges that we are facing, which, of course, it requires resources. You realize we have the major 5 water towers,
yes,
which are expansive and big in terms of area. And then, of course, we have the other 18. Then we have the 70 which are yet to be cassetted. So we are looking into the whole area, covering the whole country, not necessarily in all the counties in the country, but majorly in more than 31 counties. So it's a larger area. In terms of what we've done in protection, we've discussed and we had people talking about the issues to do with maybe the best solution is probably to fence off. And of course, we have one of the water towers which has already been fenced. The example of that is the Abadeas water tower. With the challenges and the threats that we see, yes, we are looking at that as if it should be one of the solutions. But for now, it requires a lot of resources to do that. But then the main challenge, of course, comes from the human population. So what do we do to probably find the middle ground solution as to how do we conserve it, conserve them, and maybe the issue is to do with the alternative livelihood solutions. And what are those alternative livelihood solutions? You realize, as you said, did you say a kilo of charcoal was...
A tin of charcoal is retailing for 100 shillings where previously
I heard somewhere that now it is a bag of charcoal is costing 3,000 shillings.
3,200 when before it was between 1,200.
Yes, and these are real challenges indeed. We're looking at which other alternatives should we have, should we put in place. Okay,
before we look at, the alternatives that are available, you're talking about fencing off the water towers, and you have 18 currently, and you're pushing for gazettement of 70. That brings it to 88.
Yes.
How practical is that?
One, not all the water towers are of the same area in terms of space. Others are smaller in terms of area. Others are so expansive. If you talk of Mau, it's so expansive. It's creating space. Mount Kenya is one of them, Abadeas. But the others, which are smaller in size, and what determines the way forward in terms of either to fence them off is the vulnerability of those water towers. But then Abadeas, for instance, is a big water tower, and it has been fenced. And they say where there is a will, there is way, is it? That's where we put it. But yeah, if that one has been done, yes, it's possible to be done. And we're hearing those voices from many people, and even our international partners and friends are saying the same thing. Probably, if that is what it takes to protect them, why not? But maybe slowly.
These are also, sources of livelihoods for people, the community living around it. They have also, been using this forest for a long time. Some of them had even, encroached. So how are you dealing with that particular situation in terms of sensitizing the community that we need to fence this off, and the community feeling now you're infringing on their livelihoods?
It's interesting because even the communities themselves are the ones who are giving us those solutions. One, they know in the long run, it's no longer in the long run, it's now the terms that we see now, whereby when it used to rain in April, for instance, in some places, it doesn't rain anymore. What am I saying? It's the erratic weather conditions that we see. So if that is what it takes, so be it. That's what they're saying. So the voices are not from elsewhere. They're from the people living within the water towers themselves. I'll give you an example. I come also from a place where my home is bordering one of the water towers, which is Nandi Forest and Kakamega Forest. And make no mistake of entering into that forest and try to steal or do the logging. The people themselves will arrest you. They will not take the law, but I think the responsibility and the onus is on them to protect that resource. So I think the communities have realized that this resource doesn't belong to anybody. It belongs to them. When we talk of water towers again, people tend to see it as a forest. But water towers goes beyond that. Even the areas which originally, I mean, forest is restricted to a particular gazetted land. But beyond that, it still falls under the space which houses the water tower. So it goes beyond the forest.
So when we talk about, saving our waters and the erratic rainfall, has it got everything just to do with logging, or is it much more than that?
It is. These are things that have been done over a period of time. And I think I mentioned sometimes, I think you were doing an interview with you, and I gave you an example of a country like Cape Town, where the rationing is taking place, where you're given 20 liters of water per household. Yes. And I say that, and I'll still say this, we're getting there faster if we don't do something about it. I'll also give you another example. For instance, United States of America, 1911 was in this particular position, at least for a state known as Massachusetts, until somebody came up with something known as Wick's Law. If you Google, you'll read about it. They were in this kind of situation until they made a decision themselves to say, what are we going to do about this? I think we are there now. And you realize when the government put on the moratorium, around almost 1.5 months ago, I think it's after realizing this is the situation.
Okay. Yeah. So in terms of alternatives, we are saying stop logging. Yes. But what alternatives are we given? Because if you look at, a majority of Kenyans have been relying on charcoal for their livelihood. And now when you look at, a liter of kerosene is 88 shillings, a tin of charcoal is 100 shillings. What are you telling them?
You're telling them alternative energy. I mean, energy is expensive, but also destroying the water towers is also more expensive than that. But we need to dialogue and say, what do we need to do? And this is not the solution that we just say. This is what we want to roll down to the people and to the counties. Most of the functions for protection of resources and forest is actually a default function. It goes to the county levels. Yes. And this dialogue is on. And you've heard people now saying, we want to plant trees. You used to tell them we should do that, but people themselves are asking, where are the seedlings? I think the challenge is, what are those alternative sources of energy, for instance? Because when you talk about logging, we are looking into a particular source of energy, and this is firewood. And I'll take you back to the days of the former president, which used to say, okay, kata mti moja, panda miwili. Right? Should we have been doing that, I think would be far much better than the state that we are. When the deputy president was the minister for agriculture, he said something about the number of trees we should have in our lands, and the number is 10%. If you have 10 acres of land, you need to have 1 acre of land under trees. The computation has been done because you realize very few people have more than 5 acres of land. So the computation has been done biometrically about what is the quantity of the 10% of the trees that you should have in your land. Should we have that, at least we should have fuel first to start from, right? Coming from our own farms. And I think the legislation which is coming, and I don't know whether I mentioned this, that Kenya Water Towers is coming up with a bill and policy, and I think it's going to address those issues. There is no two way about it. we have to have 10% land and not forest cover, 10% in our own lands, because our mandate as Kenya Water House goes beyond the forest. We go to the communities.
So the community must have 10% within their land?
Within their own land.
Okay.
And you'll have addressed that. But then, of course, we need to have others, probably subsidies in terms of alternative fuel like gas. Maybe the government should think of subsidizing the cost of actually buying the gas. And I think that will go a long way in addressing these issues.
Okay, you had mentioned that you are very keen on planting of bamboos as opposed to timber trees. So in terms of the long term, what is your plan? Because what economic benefit will be the bamboos to the community and the country at large?
Yeah.
Yes.
Bamboo is a grass, right? So it is not a tree. But now we are moving towards doing that because it takes the shortest time. But then, of course, research has to inform all this because we have so many species of bamboo, right? But of course, you've heard about the giant bamboo, which is the popular one, which gives you more value and then, of course, it takes the shortest time. We in Water Towers, we have a project, and we must have come across some other people also coming up with a factory for bamboo. Why bamboo? Because it gives us it sorts two issues here. One, of course, is the issue of conservation.
Yes.
We are doing the bamboo. Of course, you've been told about the riverine conservation. And we are telling people now to run away from planting lugam trees or eucalyptus along the riverine, right? So we are now saying substitute that with the bamboo. Then why the bamboo? Because it takes the shortest time to grow. And then, of course,
what
it
is
gives
the shortest time? Because we know
5
trees,
years.
5 years.
5 years, 6 years is the maturity. It reaches maturity. And of course, when you grow one, it shoots and it tends to grow in I don't know what. You grow one, and then there will be offshoots. You must have seen. And
they sort of grow like sugarcane.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
So multiple in an area of, if you do it in an area of 4 by 4, then within that period of 3 years, it will have covered the place.
Alternatively, how will the community be able to tap into that? Because there are those who survive on, charcoal burning as their source of livelihood. How will they be able to tap into
Then we are moving that with technology a notch higher. They are going still to do charcoal. We have charcoal known as charcoal briquettes. Apart from the other value addition to bamboo, where we are going to have the floor mats, we are going to have furniture and other things. So it's not only for the charcoal. We'll have charcoal, yes, out of it, but we'll have all the other alternative, because of value addition, you'll get other products out of it. Yeah. Okay,
you earlier on talked about, the population expanding. So how then do you address the question of urbanization as well as conservation? Yes, because the population is moving into the forest land.
Right.
The population is expanding, but yet you're saying, let's conserve this forest. So how do we balance these two?
The challenge in population and urbanization, if the population is expanding within the communal land next to the forest resource and water towers, the challenge and the owners will be, how will you protect? Because there'll be more challenge to protect the people from encroaching to the forest. That is the main challenge that we're facing. As opposed to people coming to the urban areas. Of course, as opposed to coming to the urban areas, then of course will be the provision of clean water resource. So again, we have the challenge of giving them the resource that is the water. So yes, it's a twofold thing, because even in the regions where the forest and water towers are, then the challenge will be. But then of course, what we're trying to offer is alternative livelihood solution. In the areas where next to the forest, we are also promoting, in terms of alternative livelihood solution, maybe fruit trees, right? If you plant, for instance, avocados, you'll have a tree, you'll have conserved the environment, and then of course you'll have the tree, the fruit coming out of it, which of course will give you the value, right? So that will reduce the pressure which would have actually been put on the forest and water towers.
Okay, I'm informed we're running out of time, but I want us to quickly focus on, the current ban that is against logging. In terms of effects, are we beginning to realize any fruits out of this particular ban? Perhaps you could have insight into that.
Yeah, one thing I've learned is that sacrifices must be made. They say Rome was not built in one day. We are beginning to see issues that the issues that we've discussed about in terms of the pricing of the resources and all that. But it reminds us day in, day out, that we have to do it, and we've got together. So remember that there is a task force in place, which we are expecting to give us a recommendation on what we're going to do, right? In a short while, probably in another month, maybe the report will, I don't know when, but it should be coming out. It is going to give a raft of recommendations on the way forward. For the time being, I think we need to sacrifice. It is necessary to pay that price. Many other recommendations have been put in place.
But in terms of sensitizing the people who perhaps have been working in the timber industry, because people are losing jobs as a result of this ban. So perhaps how are you approaching this from the public's eye, those who are affected?
Yes, I'm saying that is a price we are paying for for our country to move forward. I've also given you an example of Wickes Law in the United States, and that was way back in 1911. Right? And in 1911, they were in that kind of situation. Us, how many years? This is a young country. We are hardly 50-something years old. Them, this is a country of around 300 years plus. I think there are sacrifices to be made, and there are lessons to be learned as well. These are the lessons that we are learning, but we also believe, and I know government, of course, knows this, they see this. I remember we've been in this kind of situation before. Sometimes around 2008. But then there were alternatives. Of course, the subsidies were there, the imports were coming in and all that. But of course, that is not a permanent solution, but to give us time to come up with our own solution.
Something that will work for us.
For us, sustainably.
All right. Thank you very much, Professor. Unfortunately, our time is up, but we do appreciate you giving us insights on what exactly it is that you're doing as the Kenya Water Tower Agency in terms of trying to coordinate, oversee the protection, rehabilitation, as well as conservation of the water towers. Well, that was the CEO of the Kenya Water Tower Agency, Professor Julius Tanui, putting into perspective some of the alternatives that perhaps the government is exploring. And what, of course, has come out is that he's saying we need to focus on perhaps planting bamboo trees. Another issue that the Kenya Water Towers Agency is pushing for is the fencing off of some of the water towers. The sacrifices that he says must be made if we are to ensure that we do not get to a point where we do not have any water resource in our country. This is where we end Echo Watch tonight.
I have a message.
There is something you want to say?
Yes, I have a message. That we have a
You can look directly into the camera straight ahead of you.
I have a message, and I'm in National Organizing Committee for the national tree planting for this country, and we intend to plant 25 million seedlings. It is not ambitious, coming to think of where we are now, and I think that it will be announced very soon, and all of us as a country, in fact, we are saying plant the trees which are commensurate to the number of years.
How old you are.
If I'm 50 years, I need to plant 50 seedlings, and like that. So make sure that each one of you, I'm asking everybody to take a responsibility in planting a tree.
25 million trees in how long?
In this season, within this season, up to June.
I now get why you said it's very ambitious. But
yes, and the head of state is going to be.
All right, thank you very much. That is where we end Echo Watch tonight.